Welcome to Private for Public, a deeper look at Maine's delicate and often complicated tradition of public access to private land. Brought to you by the Maine Department of Inland Fisheries and Wildlife. Hey everyone, this is episode 3 of Private for Public. I'm your host, Kris McCabe, and this week I'm talking with landowner and Snowmobile Club President Joe Kruse, who is joining me from Lake Parlin Lodge and Cabins in Johnson Mountain Township. We're here at your lodge today and very much appreciate you having me.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking me to be on and coming all the way up here today.
So one of the big things, like obviously you and I have talked about, is your unique role. You're a large landowner here in this area. And you're also the president of the Coburn Mountain Summit Riders Club. And tell me about your club and as well as the land that you have that you allow recreational access on in this area.
Yeah, so I am the president of the Coburn Summit Riders. I think it's this is either my 13th or 14th season being involved in a snowmobile club. And you know, at the time it was kind of it was the same year that my wife and I opened the lodge here. So I realized very quickly that if we're going to be in this business, that we got to be involved pretty heavily with the club, because as most people know around here, you're either in the wood business or the tourism business. So in order to get everyone here in the winter, it's all about the snowmobiling. You know, we don't have obviously the skiing around here or anything. It's all about sledding. So yeah, I got involved pretty heavily right away, and you know, with the help of others, we've you know, managed to, I think, keep a pretty good trail system over the years, and try to be a good member of the community and doing our part.
Yeah, so I mean, you're kind of an interesting situation here, like we discussed at a couple other places similar to you, where you're kind of you really don't have a town here. There's no town government. Really, it's just Parlin Lodge in the middle here between Jackman and the Forks.
Yep.
So, like, what's your club membership and how do you draw people to your club?
Well, it's this year is the first year in our current, like with the current trails that we have. So up until this year, from the time that I started until ended at the end of last season, we had about 100 miles of trails. So we groomed from here at Parlin. We have Jackman to our north. We groomed out to Grand Falls, which is the Spencer Stream Bridge, where we met the Arnold Club, which is Eustis. And we groomed south down to the Kennebec. So the West Forks was actually part of our club at that time on our trail system, which also has very few businesses compared to some of the other clubs around. And then the Forks Club actually came, you know, to the southern side of the river there, so they butted up to us. And then we go out to the east where we meet Rockwood and Blue Ridge and those clubs. So even with the West Forks, I mean, you're talking about, you know, 3 or 4 businesses at the most. And then this year, or last year, we decided that with the few of us, because, you know, like every other club, there's just a few people that make it happen typically. We made the decision that we were going to drop about half of our mileage, just because, you know, it's a lot for a couple guys and you know, a couple drivers to maintain. So one of the businesses in the Forks stepped up, and they took over, you know, formed a new club, and we helped them out by sending a couple of our groomers down there to get them started, and so far it's been really good. You know, it's taken a lot of the load off us. But the downside is now we have one business, which is Lake Parlin Lodge. It's even on our trail system. So we're dealing with not a lot of resources, but a pile of traffic, because Coburn Summit Riders, the name of our club, is named after Coburn Mountain, which is one of the biggest attractions in the state, where people want to come ride to. It's the highest groomed snowmobile trail in the state. And so because of that, we get traffic from Eustis, Rangeley, Bingham Forks, Greenville, Rockwood, and Jackman. And everyone kind of rides to us and puts traffic on the trails, which makes them rough and harder to maintain. So yeah, that's one of the challenges, as opposed to you take a club like Jackman or Rangeley that has businesses. Rangeley's a good example because they have a lot of businesses to help out, and comparing us to them as apples and oranges in that respect. They have more miles, more machinery, more businesses, more money to deal with, and we're a big club in regards to the traffic we get, but small in every other way, membership and that sort of thing.
What is the membership that you actually currently have?
I should have looked exactly before I came on this today, but very, very low. I think we're probably about 100 members right now.
So even with 100 members, I'm guessing there's probably 6 to 8 that are active members, like when it kind of comes down to like trail maintenance and like
we
getting out and
have
grooming.
Myself, Vice President Dave Finn, who has been here since the beginning. He lives in southern New Hampshire, but is up here all winter, and honestly couldn't do it without him. We have a couple drivers, and that's pretty much it. We get a few people every now and then that will come if we have something we have to do, but yeah, it's a handful of people that make it all happen, which is the challenging part of it.
And you and I have talked about this in the past. I mean, like it's people come up here to ride. I mean, obviously Jackman, the Forks, it's a destination. Even your place here, like you have people that come up to rent your places to snowmobile. It's a big deal to snowmobile here. And this year with the weather that we've had, obviously this is the area that has the snow, so everybody's coming here. But those people what would you want to tell those people that show up here that aren't members of a club? I mean, obviously, like, they show up and they just think that the trails just happen. Like, what would be your message to them?
My message would be, if people don't start participating more, there's not going to be any more. That's just the cold, hard fact. Guys like me, and there's, a lot of guys like me around the state that put a lot into it. And we have the big joke lately is thumbs up and thank yous don't put fuel in the groomer, because that's every rider that goes by, they love seeing the groomer. They always cheer for you and everything else, but I always wonder how much of those people are actually putting in the trail box. How many of them are actually members of a club? Many of them will say, "Oh, I belong to my club down in southern Maine." Well, that does no good for the clubs up here where you ride. And it's just the cold, hard fact is that if the younger generation that's riding doesn't start helping, it's just not going to happen anymore. A lot of people don't realize how the funding works in the state, and that basically our funding comes from snowmobile registration. There's a certain percentage that goes to the grooming and maintenance. There's a certain percentage that goes to the capital equipment grants that pay for or help to pay for machinery. And then there's a small portion that goes to IF&W for enforcement, which that end of it is great, in my opinion, how it's allocated. But it's just not enough. It's Maine. It's always going to be the argument that no one wants to see the registration cost go up, but if it doesn't go up, there's no way that you can sustain fuel prices that we have and what it costs to maintain these trail systems.
I mean, that's a good segue into, I mean, you, in this area, like I saw a post that you had of Coburn Mountain, you were saying how heavily visited it is. And like, you rely heavily on volunteers, not only for what you're doing, but like, there wouldn't be a trail up there this year if you didn't have the volunteers that came to fix that.
Yes, and that's really important. I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to mention that too. So, and things like that don't happen a lot, but it just this year. So we had really, the whole state had really bad rains this past summer, storms that it gave us washouts like we'd never seen before, and one of those was up on the Coburn Mountain Summit Trail, and I mean it was bad, 6 foot gullies coming all the way down the trail. There wasn't going to be enough snow, especially this year, to fill it in. And someone had put a post out saying how bad it was, and I doubt the Summit Trail will be open this year. And Jamie Brown from Coots Brothers reached out and said, "Hey, we want to help." And I mean, you just don't realize how much that means when. In the fall we're all busy with our other stuff. We got hunting season, so we're doing that, and so it's hard to think about the snowmobiling as much. And so when someone gives up their time in November to come here and he shows up with a 160 excavator, and then Reggie Haskell comes along with him with another excavator from Haskell and Sons, and they fixed the trail. They helped us out when we needed it, and things like that are what make it, that's the only way we can keep going. Because had we, because unfortunately then in December 18th we get a storm, we're dealing with the same thing, only worse. And it's the state, I feel, has done a really good job of working with the clubs to get things repaired, and because it was tough getting going this year, and we get up and running, and with everyone's help and the state doing whatever they can to help out, we get up and running, and then now it's been just enough snow to get by.
I think there's a lot of stuff that we're going to find in the springtime that we just don't even know is out there from the damage.
Unfortunately, I don't think I have a pretty good grasp of it, just because I went around a lot after that storm, and I was able to explore all the roads. But it's going to be challenging for landowners when spring breaks and they go in and want to start harvesting wood in some of these spots. There's going to be a lot of road work to be done before they can.
So along those lines, you're kind of talking about like some of the volunteer stuff. I mean, you were saying like other interests and stuff too, like during snowmobiles, during hunting season. Like obviously you're a big hunter and part of the Big Woods Bucks guys. I mean, that's a big commitment, like pre-season before snowmobile season even starts. Kind of walk me through a timeline of like what you are doing throughout the year for snowmobile season that people may not understand that come up here and they just see a nice flat groomed trail.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So you've got the obviously the trails, which are entirely not entirely, the top of Coburn Mountain is state land, but everything else is entirely private land. So things have changed a lot since even when I first got involved, where the landowner, had the guys that which was usually the foresters that you would talk to about trail changes or where we're going, and the foresters would say, "Yeah, that's fine. Go ahead and do what work you have to do." So if we had to fix a bridge or we had to go in and put a new piece of trail in, we could go in with machinery and do what we had to do, and everything was great. It's changed a lot since then, where basically all landowner relations go through the state now, and it's that part is good in a lot of ways, where it's streamlines it, I think, where you're only dealing with one person. But the other part of that is it takes a while to get things done sometimes. So we're dealing with in the summer, because harvest change and everything, you can't really even nail down where the trail's going to go. There's a lot of changes that happen in the late fall, early winter that you have to deal with. But in the summertime, it's mostly maybe bridge work if that has to be done, but mostly the machine work, because at the end of the season, there's usually something big that happened that has to be fixed in the off season, or maintenance and that sort of thing. And really, we don't even start getting too much into that until August, if then. Number one, you're burned out from the season. You don't want to look at a groomer building anyway. I think probably a lot of clubs are different. There's probably a lot of guys that, if they do have a lot of members or, something along those lines, maybe they're doing stuff earlier. But we really don't start getting geared up till like August, September is when we start thinking more about it. And then, as the season goes on, you deal with things that you didn't expect, like a storm that washed everything out or took a bridge out or whatever. And then, during the hunting season, I know I watch a lot of the other clubs. They'll do work on the weekends, but with, guiding with moose hunts and deer season and everything, it just doesn't happen with me. So we tend to fit it in when we can, and then a lot of times it'll be early December we'll go out and start really getting after it then, which I know to a lot of people is late, but that's just the way it works with us.
So, what is the total amount of hours you think? You probably keep track pretty well as to what your volunteer hours are.
I don't, too many.
Yeah.
It's and I'm not saying that because, it's just a fact.
I think all club members throughout the state would probably say that. They probably don't, if they don't keep track, it's too many.
You could never, obviously, you have to enjoy. There's something about it that you enjoy. If it's not something obviously you do for the money, because there is no money in it, and you do it. Initially I started into it because it was important for my business, and still is. And I said all along, when I first really started learning how it works and how the funding works and everything else, in a lot of clubs it would be common for non-business owners to be running the clubs or volunteering. And my take on it then, and still is, if you don't have something at stake, it's hard to care as much as someone that does. And so I always thought it was important for businesses to be involved. And it also, it takes the people that don't have a business involved to help along the way. Going back to mentioning my friend Dave, our vice president, he's just up here giving his time and money and everything else just because he's that kind of guy and wants to help, and there's guys like him around the state that do that. That's why it's, and I think I can speak for most groomer operators, that's why it's frustrating when we're out there at night and we're grooming for 6 or 8 hours at a time for nothing, and a group of 10 sleds comes behind you and rips the trail up, and they all give you a thumbs up when they go by. I'm not smiling because I'm not happy that you're out tearing the trail up, because I'm making that trail for the guy that's riding the next morning after it sets up. And that's probably something that we as clubs can do more with, is education in regards to that, because I think honestly some people just don't realize what they're doing when they're out there tearing them up at night. But going back to your question, it's when you're out there for hours, you do ask yourself, what the hell am I doing? I'm just being honest. It's like, and there is definitely satisfaction. Grooming a trail, it is about looking back at it after you take a trail that's just destroyed, and make it someplace that people are going to come and enjoy the next day and spend their money and really appreciate what we have here in Maine. Because we do have, without a doubt, the best trail system in the Northeast. The best trails, the most wide open trails, and the best bargain for what you're paying for your registration.
This is the Talking Trash segment, where we're going to talk about illegal dumping as one of the leading causes of private land being shut down for public access. On this episode of Talking Trash, we're going to go a little off-trail. Off-trail riding in Maine during snowmobile season, that is. Once snowmobile season arrives, we know we will start to get a few complaints from landowners and clubs where they're having issues of off-trail riding. Last legislative session, the Maine Snowmobile Association proposed a bill for a new off-trail riding law. This law would allow a landowner to still allow a snowmobile trail on property, but would specifically be signed as closed to off-trail riding. In that area that was posted to off-trail riding, a snowmobiler could be charged with a civil violation similar to civil trespass. Maine Snowmobile Association recognized the importance that private landowners that allow trails to go across their property and wanted to support them with this legislation. If you come across a red sign that says closed to off-trail riding, please pay attention and stay on the marked trail. You may be the reason a trail gets closed down if you do not heed the warning. Maine snowmobile clubs work hard to maintain the trails and relationships with landowners. Don't be the one that ruins it for the rest of the snowmobiling community. Also, go join a club and help support the sport that you enjoy so much and allow it to continue for future generations. As William Stack said from Unsolved Mysteries, join me. Perhaps you may be able to solve a mystery. I think too, I don't think people really think about it, but I think of like grooming as an artwork. When you start looking at like what you guys are running for groomers and everything like that, and like you take a lot of pride in what you're doing. You have good trails. Like when you look back and you see that flatly panned trail, and you realize that, hey, you know, there's families that are going to come up and enjoy this. Like you take a lot of personal like aspect to that, where you're like, hey, listen, like you take a lot of pride in doing that, going out and doing that. Because I was kind of thinking to myself, I'm like, you probably don't get out to ride much. Most people that are groomer operators don't get to ride much. They don't get to enjoy what they're seeing out there.
Yeah, I probably am able to get out and do that more than a lot, because any excuse that, you know, if we have to go out and check the trail to see if it needs to be groomed tonight, or, you know, do something with signage or whatever, you know, I try to get out because I'm right here. I try to get out and check it out, but I don't ever get off of our trail system. I mean, I never ride beyond just our trails, like almost never. You know, it's all done right here.
So like for those who aren't really aware that do come up and ride, or maybe they don't have any interest in riding, but they may multi-use trails or anything like that with grooming. Like what is an average, like you go out and groom at night, because typically that's when the traffic is low. So what is an average night for you when you go out and groom those 50 miles of trails?
So leaving later is always better, because you have less traffic, and that's the biggest reason, because you want the trail to set up. And just a quick, really simple explanation to the trails is, when you groom a trail, your drag is going over the snow, it's processing the snow, and then the pan is compressing it. So what a lot of people don't realize, that, you know, I think a lot of people that go out and night ride, they think, well, the trail's flat, that's all that matters, and whether I ride it now or someone rides it in the morning, it's all the same. They don't realize that the friction of the pan going over the snow creates heat. Then it melts the snow just a little bit, and then it freezes. It takes 3 or 4 hours to freeze up and set up. And if it's given that time, you have a much better trail, and it lasts a lot longer. So going out later is always better, but you know, there's just a couple of us grooming, so I don't know about you, but I still like spending time with my family and being home at reasonable hours, and you know, that sort of thing. So we try to leave, at dark, which obviously as the winter goes on becomes later and later, but we try to leave it dark, and I always try to keep our runs 8 hours or less. It's just too much time in a machine. I always think about our average run might be 6.5 hours, 7 hours. So in the time that I go out grooming, which seems to go by pretty quick most of the time, you could have driven to New York City, from here. And you always think about it in that terms, like the time that you're spending out there. And that's, 4 nights a week, 5 nights a week, sometimes depending on traffic. So it's a lot easier now that we only have 2 grooming runs, where we had basically four groomers before. It's a balance. And I know we're kind of a small-time club in a big-time area because we don't have a lot of members. And now we don't have as many miles, but, going back to, say, Rangeley, where they've got 5 big tractors and they've got paid drivers, and, it's a much different type operation.
What are some of the things that you see? I mean, obviously, like you were talking about the people being respectful of the groomer after it's been groomed, but what are some of the other things that you see out there that people could do? Like, I mean, obviously join a club, that's first and foremost, but like just usage on the trail, how could they be more respectful to the landowner and to the clubs that are putting the time in?
The littering would be the first thing. And I wouldn't say it's a huge problem, but we have our kiosks, at the intersections where everyone always stops to gather. At the end of the season, it blows my mind how many people toss their cans or their little bottles or whatever, toss them right there. It just is unbelievable. The thought process to be sitting there in the Maine woods and to have that can and just chuck it. And it's not an accident because there's way too much of it at the kiosk. So
when you have a saddlebag or you have a spot in your sled that you can put it,
it came from somewhere.
It came from somewhere. You had it in there. You didn't have it in your, put it in a pocket or something like that. Like you must see that up on top of the summit, I would imagine, because it's a picturesque place and people go up there and sit there for a while.
Interestingly enough, you really don't see it there. Not like the kiosk down here on the trail system. And I really never even thought about it in those terms, but the summit is usually in pretty good shape at the end of the season. And we actually just probably should have done it a long time ago, but we finally put a donation box at the top of the mountain. Because I'll look at on social media, and everyone comes to Coburn Mountain, and there'll be hundreds of sleds up there on a Saturday. And we in the past, we've been able to basically get nothing from that, and it's not because people don't want to be given. There's just, they don't know, what it's taken. So if we don't, in the future, like I was saying before, if there's not more volunteers and people don't give more, because it's the cheapest part of your entire trip is that trail. You got your registration, which I think for residents is what, $56, $60 something.
Yep.
Non-residents, I think $120 for the season. It's the cheapest part of everything you do on this trip, but it's the most important part.
100% agree. It's,
Right?
I always think about it. I always put it in terms like, I covered that Rangeley area for a long time, and I look at it's like one of those MasterCard commercials, and you talk about like the $80,000 truck, the $40,000 trailer, and then the $60,000 in snowmobiles in there. That's not including your snowmobile gear that you're getting out with the climb gear or any of the snowmobile gear. And then you got to fill all of those vehicles full of gas to get them here from Connecticut, New York, Massachusetts, Southern Maine, New Hampshire. And you're 100% right when you say
where are you staying then, right?
Right.
That's going to cost, right?
Yep, and your food and lodging. And I always say that is the cheapest thing that you can do is donate to a club. Because you're not going to be able to do that stuff. Your investment into those types of activities if we don't have the clubs. And like for you, like when you say like it's a small town here or just like a small community of members that are going out there. I think of that like in the storm damage we had and how much work's going to go into the trail system and how do we maintain this for future generations. I know that you and I have talked about that, like the importance of people realizing that this all occurs on the backs of private landowners. And not only do we need to support the clubs that do the work there, but we need to support the landowners saying, hey, listen, this means a lot to us.
Mm-hmm.
And like I know that you and I have had those conversations about that and how important that is and how do we show that? How do we get more people to get involved and to realize that the trails just don't make themselves. Like, yeah, Mother Nature makes the snow, but
Oh yeah, there's so much more than that.
yeah.
And touching on that just a little bit, I mean, it's always been that way in Maine, where it's the private landowners that make it possible for all this, whether it's snowmobiling or hunting, fishing, and four-wheeling, all of it. We have such a unique situation here that honestly, I think a lot of Mainers that have grown up with it sometimes take it for granted because they don't realize how different it is or haven't dealt with how different it is in other states. So we have such a great opportunity where every business survives on the open land up here. When and if that ever started to change, it could be devastating. And so, to your point, the appreciation and support and acknowledgement of that is very important. Maine has done, I think, a great job at trying to keep it that way with landowner relations, with the laws, with the way everything's set up. But there is no guarantee for the future, I see things changing with the whole carbon credit thing, and how what a really, in my opinion, negative effect that can have on the state. So, we can only hope that things can kind of stay like they are so that we can continue the way of life like we have it.
It is interesting. I mean, up here, like you're dealing with the big woods, and then like I always think back to our commissioner said last year she went for a ride from her residence through Wyndham down there, and I think it was like she said she was behind pools, going on people's like septic systems, riding through, and you think about how like up here you're dealing with how many landowners are you dealing with? Maybe mostly one.
Yeah, I think when the club had the 100 miles, we were 3-4 landowners.
Yes, and like you think about it, like that you can go down in Wyndham and ride a snowmobile and go to a store or go to a business.
Yep.
To think about that it's not only just up here where the really good riding is, but those small clubs down there and like what they're dealing with and how fragile that is. It is a very interesting topic, and we're so fortunate to have what we've had over the years. And I do think that's the biggest thing that I want people to realize is that don't take that for granted. Like, I mean, I used to ride my snowmobile to high school when I was growing up in Central Maine.
Right.
Like that was like the thing to do. You were the cool kid if you rode your snowmobile to school. And now you don't really see that a whole lot. You probably see that in Jackman. Jackman's probably Jackman, Rangeley, but like the southern part of the state, like I don't know if that happens anymore. But I think like that's the thing to realize is it doesn't matter where you go here. We really have it special. Like you've been all over the country, and like you've probably have a better comparison. Like there really isn't anything like that.
Yeah, a lot of places, and you do make a good point with the landowner thing, because it's something that I've never dealt with is these multiple hundreds of landowners some of these clubs deal with. My parents live in Skowhegan, and they have a trail that, comes, just a small little section of the trail comes on their property. It might be 500 feet, but they have to sign something every year, and have someone's got to come out and stake it. And so, man, I'll tell you that that's one of the things that I'm really thankful that we don't have to do, because I know that for the clubs down south, that's probably a large part of their job in the off season is getting all that stuff lined up.
For sure. So, like, one of the topics I did want to hit on, just because you're kind of up here, but like, obviously this year we have the new off-trail riding bill that came in from Maine Snowmobile Association. They proposed this as a way to support landowners, and I know that you and I have kind of talked about it a little bit. But what do you see for like some of the issues up here with the off-trail riding, and do you think that this bill is going to help?
My position on it is I think that, and I know there's isolated instances probably where there's lots of damage done, but I feel that a moose does more damage than a typical snowmobile does to the woods with the trees they damage and so forth. Not to say it doesn't happen, because I don't want to sound like I'm completely discounting it, but off-trail riding and the way that we get around up here is what makes Maine so special. You know, and if we're going to talk a little bit about hot topics, we can talk about speed limit. If Maine ever goes to a speed limit, it's going to hurt, I think. Overall, I think that things work like they are. People come here because of it's freedom. It's freedom to be out on your sled and enjoy it and have a wide open trail. 13,000 miles of trails we have in Maine. And when you start putting all the restrictions and changing everything, it's, in my opinion, it's going to do nothing but hurt the sport and hurt the state. And the big picture should be, let's try to keep it as close to what we have as possible. If we have a problem area, and I think from what I know about the law and what we've talked about, it's more for specific areas, that if there's a plantation that's getting heavily damaged, that the landowner at least now has some teeth to say, hey, we don't want you in here and we have a way to stop it. If it turns into a blanket thing where we have to just stay on trails, it's from your perspective, right, the enforcement is tough.
Right. And I think like that was the big thing when we were working with MSA on that. That was a big concern, that we didn't want to limit like all off-trail riding, like shed hunters, rabbit hunters, coyote hunters, and the people that do the off-trail riding. I mean, the idea was that it would limit them to areas where they couldn't do it. So that way it's an crop field up in the county where they have irrigation. They've had problems with people running over irrigation, or a plantation that they've just replanted and they don't want anybody in there. Because the idea has come up in the past of like, hey, working with Onyx or anything like that to have designated areas for off-trail riding. But I think having designated areas limits you even more, where having areas designated as closed to off-trail riding. Because if you have those certain areas, you're going to have more access, like you and I were talking about, the more traditional as to what you already have. So I think it was a good compromise, because then you can actually, before where it was specific that the only way you could deal with someone that rode off trail on someone's property was it was a criminal trespass. So you'd have to catch them, warn them, and then prosecute them if they did it again.
Right.
So this allows for a little bit of teeth behind it, where say someone has a horse pasture out behind, say your parents had a horse pasture and the trail comes across and they wanted people to stay right on the trail in that little short section. It could be posted on both sides, and if they're caught off trail, it'd be a civil trespass, which I think in the end, I think it's a good compromise, where allowing access and protecting the landowners, trying to give them a little bit. I mean, I always joke about it, but I mean, now like all the different models of snowmobiles and stuff, you never see the guys on the trails a lot. All the commercials are the guys boondocking or riding in Utah or somewhere out there.
Well, it's changed. The sleds themselves have changed snowmobiling entirely. Where it used to be a 121-inch track with a 3/4 lug is going to do way less damage on a trail than a 1 3/4 track, with a 950. It's just.
And you probably see that just on the groom trails. So the big paddle tracks. I mean, especially when they step on it when they leave the signage and stuff. I mean, you probably see it a lot going up Coburn.
Here's another PSA. Please don't leave little piles of snow all over the trail when you take off. There's no reason for it. And another thing with the off trail, it's. I love off trail riding. I think I might hit the groom trail and use it to get to some place that I want to go off and play on the side or shed hunt or whatever it is. But it's the guys that have the mountainslides and they go down the groom trail and all they do is hit off the sides of the groom trail back and forth. Well, all they're doing is tearing the trail up. And there's millions of acres to go play where you don't have to do that.
I think that's the thing too, is like people, like they talk about off-trail riding, and there's different types of off-trail riding. There's the off-trail riding that you're just going checking logging roads, you kind of ride off, you may check a cut here and there. But when you always see the trenching that comes out and they make it all the way to the dirt in the gully and they throw it out onto the groom trail, like that's where the complaints always come in. That's where landowners get upset because they see that abuse that, I mean, in the springtime, you're probably not going to see it, but it's fresh in their mind when it's on a fresh blanket of white snow and they see the sticks and the dirt coming out. And I think that's the good compromise is, like, if you want to do that, like, there's places to do that. Just don't do that on, like, right there on the groom trails, and don't leave those piles of snow because, well, like you said, at 5 o'clock in the morning or 6 o'clock in the morning when someone comes out after that refreezes and they hit it at 65 miles an hour, you're going for a ride.
Exactly. And, it is little things like that. So that's one example. Or, when if I'm riding off trail and I'm working my way through the woods to another road or whatever, I intentionally go around small fir trees or you can dodge them, you don't have to run over them. And so it's little things like that, I think, that are going to be important to keeping things the way they are. It's going back to the landowner that's marking it off trail because his irrigation's getting torn up. When I say these things, I'm not that landowner, so I'm not looking at it from their perspective. And I can understand someone's frustration if something like that's happening. But I know from the way that the woods are around here and the way that most people ride around here, you'd never know someone was there when spring comes.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of the landowners, like, they're super supportive of that. They enjoy people out using their land. I always get the question to, like, people that are landowners. They're like, what's in it for me if I allow recreational access? And it's always hard because I have to, like, really kind of choke back and be like, there is nothing. Like, really, the only reason they do that is out of the goodness of their heart. They may enjoy the trail systems. Like, up in the big woods, they may use the trail systems to go find wood lots and stuff and cruise, and the foresters may use them. But a lot of times there really is no incentive.
I always, I think it's changed over the years, and the way I always kind of look at it is, like around here, for years it was Scott Paper. Scott Paper Company owned this large piece of land up here, and all the employees were from the area. Everyone lived and worked in the woods around the area. They worked for Scott Paper. Scott Paper left all their land open for everyone to use and recreate on. And to me, it was a give and take. You use our land to recreate and make your money, and in turn, we can make our money by, harvesting wood and not having to deal with some wackadoodle environmentalist that doesn't want to cut anything. And, so it was like a symbiotic relationship. Everyone loved Scott Paper because they were the company, employing everyone. So that's changed because now it's big corporations that own the land. Fortunately, they've kept it. It's almost to the point, I think, where it's just Maine tradition now.
Yep.
People understand that. People understand that without that, I mean, let's say worst case scenario, the landowners in this area said, which everyone knows they have every right to do, they could put up gates right now. This area will shrivel up and die. There's no way around it. We rely on that, so the more that relationship is fractured, the worse it is for the area. So it's in everyone's best interest for, everyone to get along.
Like you said too, I mean, the tradition, and I think the large landowners and the small landowners, they realize that tradition, but also they look at it like, hey, these people out on the landscape are eyes and ears, which is kind of like self-policing. Mm-hmm. And like we always talk about that, but like, I mean, like you guys being out there grooming and stuff and talking to the wardens or like talking to the landowner and building those relationships, I think they can really appreciate that, which is something unique to Maine for sure.
Yep.
It's definitely.
And it is important for people to understand how it works, you know, how the whole, because it's like in regards to hunting. I remember when I lived in Florida and would come up here hunting and I'd bring friends up from down there, they just couldn't believe that when I'd say, yeah, anywhere that you see, you can hunt. Everything you're looking at, you can hunt. And it's special. I mean, it's what makes Maine unique. And we have to do everything we can to keep that. We have to. It's important for everyone.
100%. I mean, that's why, like, when I talk to you about it and like talking about snowmobiling, I know you don't get to talk about snowmobiling a whole lot on your other podcast.
No, I get shot down quite a bit. Well, yeah, I do.
I know that there's two of you that like to talk about snowmobiling. So, like, when I talked to you the other day, like, I mean, you kind of share that same vision as to like what I do is to like continue to show people like, hey, this is what you do. This is how we continue this tradition that we have. I mean, snowmobiles, like the large businesses like that sell snowmobiles, like they rely on it. I mean, they don't sell snowmobiles here if we don't have the access. And by far, like, we have the most snowmobilers in the Northeast, probably one of the top 5 in the country, I would say.
For sure.
Like, for sure, with our snowmobiles. And it's all on the backs of volunteers, and it's all on the backs of private landowners that allow that. And that's the story that we really like want to get out there so that people understand that. Because, I mean, me as a game warden, I don't go out and do any enforcement if we don't have any activities out there. I don't go out there and check registrations. You don't go to snowmobile to pond to go ice fishing if you don't have that. You don't get to go shed hunt. You don't get to rabbit hunt. You don't get to coyote hunt.
Yep.
We rely so heavily on that. And that's really the story that is out there for sure. But no, I just want to thank you for sure.
Yep. And, you know, it's a lot of, to look at it, you know, some places real close to us that operates completely differently, you know, you look to Quebec. And I don't even know what a trail pass is. Last time I heard it was $3.25, but that was probably 8 or 10 years ago. It's probably more now. And everyone raves about Quebec trails. They're always good. They're always, so they say, how do they do that? Well, it's state funded completely. I don't think they rely on, I don't think as much as we do on donations and volunteers, but a club will have 25 miles of trail and a brand new tractor to take care of it and unlimited funds because their registration fee is so high. So if we just here in Maine took, let's say we doubled it, so instead of $56, you know, it's going to be 104, no, 112.
But you think about it, that's cheap.
$112, you know, it's still cheap, and it's twice the money that we have right now. We could easily do it.
I've always said that too. Like, I look at a lot of the things, like, I mean, we're one of the only states in the lower 48 that has moose hunting. We have such tradition here of deer hunting, snowmobiling, ATVing, and I really look at our stuff and I say, we're a bargain. We are a bargain. I mean, when I look at other states and like dream of going to hunt there or go recreate out there, it's expensive. And like for what we have, like it is definitely, I mean, we saw an increase in the ATV registrations that goes to the trail fund probably 2 or 3 years ago now. And that increase goes to trail maintenance. The biggest thing that I've heard about that is that trying to find contractors. It's very difficult to find enough contractors out there to do the maintenance. But it's definitely like one of those things that we have to look at in the future as to how are we going to maintain this and how are we going to continue this tradition, because I don't think it's a tradition that we want to lose for sure. It's just how do we maintain it?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, appreciate it, Joe. Thanks so much for having me up here, and beautiful view out on the lake today. So it's definitely a very nice day to be up here. But if anybody wants to join your club and to reach out to you, how can they do that?
CoburnSummitRiders.com for membership, and if you're on our trail system, we have at our kiosk now we do have Venmo, so it's as easy as just putting on your phone and hey, $5, $10, just a few dollars. I always say if everyone did that to every club they go to, just drop a few bucks here and there, it makes all the difference in the world and gets you nice flat trails.
Go out there and support all those clubs and go enjoy the trails. Hopefully there'll be a little bit more snow in the future.
Appreciate you having me, Kris.
Thanks, Joe. Thank you for tuning in and learning more about the impact that snowmobile clubs have on outdoor recreation. I hope you'll consider joining a club or donating your time to help continue this way of life in Maine. Join me again next week as I head to Ashland, Maine, to talk with Matt Stedman about working with landowners to maintain access to outdoor recreation in Maine. Matt is the Northern Region Vice President of the Maine Snowmobile Association, as well as the Forester for Irving Woodlands. We'll learn more about how you can make a difference and support Maine's snowmobiling tradition. In the meantime, do your part to help protect Maine's tradition of access to private land by being a responsible land user and showing your appreciation and support for Maine's private landowners.